Welcome to r/Prorevenge, where OP destroys the life of the man who beat him as a kid. My parents were renovating their house about a year ago and they needed an electrician to move some lighting fixtures. Generally, I have a friend that's my go-to electrician for stuff like this, but my parents had hired a guy to paint the living room and needed this done quickly. My electrician friend happened to be on vacation, so he wouldn't be able to get out to me until after the painter was already scheduled to come. After referring with a couple of other friends, they recommended an electrician. We are all from the same country and happen to immigrate to the same small town. So people within our culture generally recommend other people from the same country. The electrician comes by for a quote. I never met him individually, and he tells my parents that it's all based on the amount of time it would take and that he can't give them an exact quote because he doesn't know how much time it's going to take until the job is already started. My parents think this sounds reasonable and end up hiring him. Just as an aside, I installed Nest cameras for my parents in their living room facing the front door, so we had a good view of the area where the job was being performed. This job takes him about an hour, and he literally sat on my couch on his phone for about 5 hours, watching TV, kicking his feet up, waiting for my mom to get home, so that he could show her the work is completed and charge her like 6 hours for a job that took him about an hour. Which I confirmed how unprofessional his behavior was on my Nest cam. My parents didn't want to cause any friction, so they paid him for the amount of time he charged them. I believe it was like $500 for something that should have really cost like $150 or so. Anyway, the lighting fixtures were installed, he received his check, and went on his merry way. My electrician friend later confirmed that this guy had seriously upcharged my parents. A few months later, I decided to take a side gig selling solar as a 1099 employee. I was making decent money at my existing job, but I had a wide enough network where I could help people around me with generally good solar deals and make some good money for myself on the side. The company I connected with would give me, quote, my price on panels including installation, as well as on the roof if a roofing job was required. My price was extremely good, and the way I made my money was by tacking on my fee at the end, built into the roof price and the per watt price of the panels plus installation. Much like my parents found the electrician, this same electrician, who I had never met, found me inquiring about a roofing job. I told him that I don't do standalone roofs, but that I could package something for him including solar, which would get rid of most of his electricity bill. He said he didn't have the money up front for the roof or the panels, which is fine because we can finance, and it started to sound like he was a little bit desperate as his roof was leaking and he didn't have the capital to fix it. Generally, when I go to a client, I try to keep the price down and make it more desirable for the client. I'd rather make less money than no money. So I generally make around $3,000 to $5,000 per install, which is a win-win. When I got the call, I thought the guy's name was familiar. And sure enough, it was the electrician who had helped my parents and left a bad taste in my mouth. At this point, I knew he was desperate for a resolution to his roof issue, and I knew he barely spoke any English. So my word was going to be gold. I set up an appointment to go meet with him in about a week. I knew that I was going to upcharge the stuffing out of him due to the language barrier he would have with other installers, his desperation, and the fact that he upcharged my parents. I got the price quote from the installer that said that the roof would cost about $10,000 for a strip and re-roof. This was a really good house, as the house was a multifamily unit and I was expecting the quote to come around $15,000. They also gave me the price on the solar panels, which would be around $15,000. So the price I was looking at for the project was around $25,000. Generally, on a good situation like this, I might have called in $29,000 total, got him a spectacular deal, make a couple grand, and called it a day. But I was thinking, screw this guy. So I adjusted the cost of the roof to $19,000 and the price of the panels to $21,000, half expecting that I would eventually need to come down on the pricing at some point. I went over there to meet up with him, proposed his setup, told him how good the quality of the roofing job would be, which is accurate, and that the solar system would virtually wipe out his electricity bill, and that I would get him set up with a 25-year loan to keep his monthly payment down. He agreed to this, was excited to get his roof done, and really didn't care much about the panels. But they were part of the bundle and on we went. Once everything was installed, I was paid out on my deal and went to cash my $15,000 check. I went to my parents' house and gave them $1,500 each and explained to them what had happened and how I stumbled upon a $15,000 commission check. Just so it's clear, there is nothing shady about what I did. It was way more expensive than it needed to be, and everything was disclosed to him properly. He just paid more than he would have had to, even if he simply shopped around. But at the end of the day, it's well within my rights to charge whatever I want. Like, it's within the rights of the customer to tell me to F off. A big chunk of what he paid is covered by incentives, but he still paid way more than typical. Moral of the story, especially for contractors, plumbers, electricians, and mechanics. Don't screw people because you're more aware of how things work than they are in a particular field. Because you might end up getting screwed later tenfold. OP, you should have sent him an itemized invoice. Fixing the roof and installing the solar panels, $15,000. Sitting around for 6 hours laughing at how stupid you are, another $15,000. Our next Reddit post is from ThatChick321. My father is a plumber. Great guy, does the work you want and does his best on every job, acting like it's his own home to try to make sure the customer is satisfied. He was doing a job at a home where they wanted a complete bathroom remodel, asking the owners of the home the whole way through specific things. Where they wanted the sink, shower, and toilet to be located, what kind of tiles, what designs for said tiles, even down to what color grout they'd want. He did everything to their specifications, and on one of the last days of work, the day he was grouting everything, they decided to say it wasn't the correct tiles, they didn't like it, and were going to pay him half of what he quoted them. Half of what he was owed for this 2-week-long job. 2 weeks being a decently short amount of time to demo and rebuild a whole freaking bathroom. He told them that this was wrong, that they literally picked everything, so why was it wrong now? They didn't care, told him to finish and leave. My father, ever the people pleaser, did so. Except he mixed sugar in with the grout, then grouted their bathroom. Their whole bathroom was finished with sugar grout, guys. He only got paid half, but they had to spend much more than that on bug sprays for years. Years! Nothing could keep the bugs away from that sweet, sweet bathroom. According to a neighbor of theirs who was a friend of my father's. Don't F with your servicemen. Pay them. Don't be a prick or they may just be extra sweet. The funny thing is that down in the comments, someone asked OP how come the homeowners never blamed OP's dad for the crumbling grout. Well, apparently, they assumed that the crumbling grout was because of all the bug bombs and bug sprays they were using. This is the revenge that just keeps on giving. Our next Reddit post is from ZeraskGuilda. This one is my favorite of all the multilingual escapades I've had. Years ago, I was running a kitchen for one of those typical Lebanese American style diners. Seriously, more often than not, it was just me back there. It sucked, but I needed the job. The owners thought I was going to be easy to screw over, and they'd talk all kinds of garbage to each other, apparently not remembering that I had explicitly said I'm proficient in Arabic when they hired me. So I recorded these conversations, my stated single-party consent, that often bled into them trying to make me cover for them on major health code violations. Seriously, they expected me to cover for them while they talked garbage about me with me right in front of them. So I quickly began searching for a new job and continued to document the bejesus out of everything. Every single thing. I had pictures, timestamps, temp logs, all of it. And then they messed with my pay. I was willing to just walk away and leave it at that. But then they messed with my pay. Everything that I had been gathering as my just-in-case plan became the weapon I needed it to be. I confronted them about the very obvious wage theft. They denied it. Even in the face of the major discrepancies in work hours, set wage, and amount withheld in taxes. That night, I got a call from another place I'd applied to asking if I was still interested in the position. Obviously, I was. Told them I could start in about 3 days. I walked in for my next shift with prints of everything in a file, put everything on the table and told him, "You've been stealing from me. I have all of this in proof of that, and all of this ready to go to the health department, labor department, and IRS. Pay me what you owe, and this doesn't see the light of day." He was very quick to pay me, in cash, the amount that I had recorded missing from my checks, and took the files and started shredding them. As I turned to leave his office, I turned back around and told him, in Arabic, "I could understand you the whole time, you pig hugger." And I walked out, quit on the spot. Of course, he didn't have the only copies of those files. When I got home, I sent everything off to the relevant departments. He was shut down about a month later. Man, every single time it happens, I will continue to be bewildered. Why do people screw over the workers who know all of their dirty secrets? That doesn't make any sense. Our next Reddit post is from Kveldson. When I was 15, my mom started dating a man she met on a dating website. I didn't like him the first time I met him, and 2 months later, he moved into the house. About 3 weeks after he moved in, he took my skateboards, self-built half-pipe, ramps, BMX bike, ice hockey gear, and many other things to the dump one day while I was at school. He said he did this because he didn't want all of my garbage cluttering up his garage. Maybe 2 months later, he punched me in the stomach for the first time because I got up from the dinner table without asking to be excused. From there, it escalated into full-fledged beatdowns for the smallest perceived slight to his authority. One day, he decided to take my extensive Pokemon card collection, even more extensive comic book collection, my Game Boy and PS2 with all the assorted games, and my fantasy and sci-fi book collection and got rid of it all because 15-year-old boy should be playing football and baseball, not being a bundle of sticks nerd playing with Pokemon cards and reading comics and books. I would like to add that he was a middle school teacher and in his off time refereed and umpired local middle and high school sports games. My mom never intervened and in fact acquiesced when he demanded that she stop giving me lunch money because the little turd will just spend it on comics and other gay garbage. One day, I took maybe $3 and change out of his change jar so that I could buy a slice of pizza and some fruit punch during lunch at school, because I was tired of being hungry. My twin sister was always a bit of a butthole and frequently blackmailed me into doing her chores from a young age. I was fed up and refused to do something, so she told him what I'd done. This man actually called the police and pressed a larceny charge against me, and once the police had left, proceeded to beat me senseless. At that point, I ran away. When the cops found me and returned me to home, I found out that he had been trying to talk my mom into sending me away to military school or something of that nature. I ran away again, and between having run away several times and the larceny charge, ended up turning 16 in juvenile detention. I spent the next couple years miserable and afraid, frequently contemplating suicide. Once I was out on my own, I didn't speak to my mom for several years. We eventually reconciled, and by that point, they had married. I was a lot bigger than I had been as a young teenager, and I had gotten into weightlifting. So he no longer acted like he was going to punch me to make me flinch, much less actually hit me, and we basically avoided each other for the most part. My mother found out that she had stage 4 cancer and no longer wanted to waste any of the time she had left with him. So she had a lawyer draft up a separation agreement whereby he would receive a set amount of money upon separation and would have 45 days to retrieve his belongings from the house. He had spent his entire inheritance in 6 months and then had to sell his mother's house that he grew up in order to settle his debts shortly before they started dating. And my mother bought the house back from the bank before they married. She allowed him to keep the house and he moved back into his mother's house. My mother passed away about 9 months after their separation and, despite the agreement, had been allowing him to come and get his stuff piecemeal. I put an immediate end to that. he was past the deadline to remove his personal effects, and they were now legally mine to dispose of as I saw fit. I sold his baseball card collection, around $14,000, and his autographed sports memorabilia, around $11,000, and also sold all of his woodworking equipment, along with several finished pieces of furniture that he had made, $6,500, I think. I kept his mother's engagement ring, a platinum band with 3 diamonds, roughly 2 carats, his wedding band, his coin collection, I also collect coins, and some tools and other odds and ends. Now comes the real fun. Around a month ago, I finally saw him at the grocery store. As he was leaving, I approached him. I told him I had sold his collections as he was pushing his cart out towards his car. He reacted exactly as I expected. He took a swing at me multiple times. I already had my phone ready to dial 911. Several of these punches missed, and the ones that did connect didn't have much effect because he's nowhere near as strong as he was 20 years ago in his 40s. And I was no longer a skinny little 15-year-old. He continued to try to punch me as I spoke to the 911 operator and was actively ramming his grocery cart into my new Toyota as the police officers pulled into the parking lot. He was arrested for assault, communicating threats, and destruction of property. As a result, he lost his job and pension at the local middle school. And because he had never learned how to save money while married to my somewhat wealthy mother, ended up having to sell his mother's house because he hired an expensive lawyer, thinking he could somehow beat the charges. My nephew, who was on the football team, made it well known to his friends that he not only had just been arrested and convicted of assault, as well as other charges, but that he had also beat me as a child, causing several parents to call for him to resign from refereeing and umpiring for local sports games. My niece and my girlfriend's much younger sister are enrolled at the middle school where he worked and say that he was not only universally disliked, but when he came up to the school to get his belongings, he made a big scene and ended up hysterically crying as he was leaving. At least, that's what they've heard from the kids who were attending summer school at the time. His son, who he was equally abusive towards as a child, refused to take him in or help him out, so the abusive stepfather ended up having to take a job as a cashier at Walmart so that he could afford the rent on his sucky little trailer in an absolutely awful neighborhood. Even though that Walmart is not the closest Walmart to my house, that is now the only place where I go grocery shopping or to purchase anything that I need. I purposefully stand in line longer than I need, just so that he can be the one who has the pleasure of ringing up my purchases. The first time I went through his line, he attempted to ring up multiple items more than one time to overcharge me. And when I called him on it, he said that I was mistaken. I asked for a manager, and the manager believed him that it was an accident, but he learned that he can't get away with that. The second time, I made sure to be as nice as possible and had to ask for a manager because he was overwhelmingly rude. The people in line behind me backed me up, and he got in some trouble for that. Every time I go there and step into line, I see him die a little bit inside, and it gives me so much satisfaction. Sometimes I'll say that I'm paying with exact change, and as I'm about to hand him the money, I'll say, "Oh, I didn't realize I had a rare coin from his collection in my pocket. I guess I'll use my credit card." I just sold his expensive ratcheting wrench set, and so on Monday when he works again, I'm going to go buy my daughter one of their better above ground pools. And as he's ringing it out, tell him, I know that my daughter is just going to love this pool. It's not like I would have ever used those expensive ratcheting wrenches anyway. OP, that was absolutely beautiful and a pleasure to read. That dude is a grade A douchebag. Like, what kind of guy trashes on someone who collects Pokemon cards and then collects coins and baseball cards? I'm gonna be honest with you, nowadays, collecting coins is nerdier than collecting Pokemon cards. That was r/Prorevenge, and don't forget I've got merchandise in my store. You can find the link down in the description. Please buy some of my merch because it's the best way to support my channel.